this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
We're feeling it deeply. Our industry is feeling it deeply.
Bridging divides. How are border states navigating the economic impact of Trump's tariffs, and what is their message to Canada? My broadcast exclusive with Michigan Senator Elissa Slotkin.
Canada is very well positioned to answer those demands.
The closure of the Strait of Hormuz has led to what some call the largest energy crisis in history. What opportunity is there to grow Canadian exports? The head of the International Energy Agency joins me.
This agreement is about so much more than just goods trade.
Stalled talks. U.S. automakers call for an extension to CUSMA as trade tensions hold up negotiations. What might move Washington closer to a deal with Ottawa? Former U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai is here. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. It's been a U.S.-heavy weekend for Prime Minister Mark Carney. He spent Friday night with former U.S. President Barack Obama, who was in town for a speech. And then yesterday, U.S. Senator Elissa Slotkin met with Carney on the sidelines of a Progressive Action Summit. This morning, I spoke to Senator Slotkin about that meeting and the state of Canada-U.S. relations. Senator Slotkin, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks for having me.
I know you spent a lot of time with Canadian politicians over the past couple of days, and you did meet with Prime Minister Carney. So I'm going to start sort of there and the way he is viewing the world right now to see if it lines up with you. He said last month that many of our former strengths based on our close ties to America have become our weaknesses that we must correct. Do you see the Canada-U.S. relationship in a similar lens as the Canadian Prime Minister?
Well, look, I mean, it's painful for me to hear that as someone who is a senator from Michigan, grew up coming to Canada every summer. I mean, you guys are our cousins. And part of the reason that I came and I wanted to have those meetings was to provide a bit of counter-programming that there's still plenty of American senior politicians who care deeply about the U.S.-Canada relationship. And certainly, Michigan, we're feeling the strain between the two countries more than I would imagine almost any state in the U.S. Yeah. And we talked about it, and I understand how difficult this relationship has become. I think my point to him, to the Prime Minister, and to other ministers is this is a tough moment in time, but it's not the last moment in time. And we have long-standing strategic interests that align, and let's not on either side of the border, let the current conflict kind of predict and determine what's going to happen for the next 30 years. There is a future after this president, and we have a lot in common that still matters to both.
Well, speaking of what matters to both, that is the auto industry is the prime example of that. Obviously, your home state at the center of that. There was a report last week that found those tariffs are costing U.S. automakers $12.5 billion. What has been the impact in Michigan? How is the state surviving given this?
Yeah, again, based on the fact that manufacturing is our biggest sector and then agriculture is our second biggest, I can't think of a state more impacted by tariffs than Michigan, and particularly because of the border and the way we, frankly, integrated our supply chains, right? I mean, we made it a point in a globalized world to say the border is just kind of a stop between our supply chains. It's not a huge deal. So we're feeling it deeply. Our industry is feeling it deeply. Our suppliers are feeling it deeply. All the huge industry that supports autos. And then, we're watching things develop. We don't like watching a decision to let Chinese vehicles into Canada. That's not something we want in the United States. And so we're struggling for the first time in a long time being on different pages on international trade issues. And again, I'm here to sort of say that we have big problems with the tariffs as well at home, and we're trying to push back on some of these things that just don't make sense in the U.S.-Canada relationship.
As I'm sure you know, the formal talks around the CUSMA review, or USMCA as you guys call it, have not begun. What are you thinking Canada could be doing to get those talks going in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we know that those talks will have to happen this year. Those are really important talks to all three of the countries involved. I think the important thing for, frankly, both sides of the border is going to be to keep cooler heads and remember that we do have so many strategic interests that align, and we shouldn't get into a pissing match back and forth. And that's as much of a message to my side as it is to anyone in Canada, right? We have interests, and so this is a negotiation that is just coming up. It's something that it's timely, and we shouldn't let kind of the animosity lead to bad decisions on real trade overlap that we have.
You mentioned their Chinese EVs. You actually introduced a bill to ban them. I wonder whether that came up in your conversation with the Prime Minister. It's a limited amount that Canada is going to allow in, but it is part of the strategy of diversifying beyond the United States. Do you see this as something that is potentially harmful to the Canada-U.S. relationship?
Well, look, I mean, I'm thinking about it as a state that has borders, many borders with Canada. I think it's to me to have, like, for instance, a BYD car, which is, a wholly Chinese-made vehicle with a data package that's sending back 3D video and mapping and geolocation and can be hacked back to Beijing. Those are things that I see as I'm a former CIA officer. They're national security issues, not just economic security issues. So again, I understand that Canada is looking elsewhere and trying to diversify. I think the point that I would make and did make to Canadian leaders is, just because we have become more difficult doesn't mean the Chinese are always the straightest shooters when it comes to national security. And so just keep that deeply in mind as you make these deals.
I want to ask sort of a quite local question, and it's about the Gordie Howe Bridge, because the opening's been delayed and the president has been threatening to block the opening. He's backed down, but I wonder what you're doing on your end to make sure that this is happening, that it goes ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally one of the most bipartisan issues in the state of Michigan. We, it was a Republican governor that made the decision to work with the Canadians to set up this bridge. It's there. I drove into Detroit on Friday. You can see it in the skyline. Like, it's a real thing, and we deeply want it to open. You'll be able to drive from Montreal to Miami without hitting a street light. Like, it's amazing. And it's good for both sides. So, and the Canadians paid for it. So we want that open, and part of my reason in coming here was to be able to be helpful back in Washington to put pressure on my side to make sure we open this spring. That's when it was supposed to open. We need it opened. We need it for the state of Michigan, for both our countries. So I'm a deep believer in the Gordie Howe. And who could be against anything named Gordie Howe?
That'll be a welcome answer to lots of Canadians, as you can imagine. I do want to ask, given your experience in Iraq, given, as you said, your national security experience, how you think things are going to end when it comes to Iran. The Strait of Hormuz remains closed. It is very unclear how this is going to get to an end. What are you hoping to see or watching for?
Well, look, I think like everybody, I mean, you're hoping that we resolve this as soon as possible through some sort of negotiation, right? That's the ideal outcome. Look, I did serve 3 tours in Iraq, and so I will tell you it's easier to get into a war than it is to get out. And my president has become a foreign policy president. He's taken military action in 9 locations in the world in 15 months, more than any U.S. president in history. And while he certainly talked a lot about putting bold action into domestic issues, he's really done it abroad. And now, there is a reason why we've had a pernicious problem with the Iranians for a long time. They have strategic geography, and that Strait of Hormuz, their control over it is affecting every single person in Canada, in the United States, with the price of oil all over the world. We want the president to buckle down, to get serious about negotiations, and to do what he needs to do to let the world economy breathe again. We've deteriorated some of their capabilities, which is important. But for the world economy and his own citizens, this thing needs to come to an end.
You have been spending the last few weeks in battleground states. You've been everywhere, every program that you could imagine in the United States. Lots of people talking about the message you have for Americans right now. Is it a real thing that you could put your name forward for a Democratic candidate for president? Is that something you'd think about?
Look, I've been spending a lot of time in the Midwest in particular. That's where I'm from. And I think certainly it would be better for everyone in my country if there was more Midwestern voices. We're very practical, reasonable, good Midwesterners. I think we get along very well well with the Canadians. And so I think that voice needs a bigger kind of megaphone in our politics. We have a lot of people from very, very Democratic areas and very, very Republican areas who kind of dominate the conversation. In the middle, we're swing states. You know, we're people that we kind of like believe in the person over the party. We're going to have a very competitive, very large Democratic primary in Michigan. In Michigan, in the United States for president. I think there's like 29 people. It does not have to be me. I just want those voices to be out there, and I want a new generation in American politics. That is the most central theme from wherever I go, is people just want out with the old and in with the new, and I want to be a part of shaping that next generation.
Senator Alyssa Slotkin, thank you so much for making the time for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the Michigan perspective. Let's get the Canadian side of this story and go to Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens. He joins me live this morning. Nice to see you again, Mayor.
Good morning, Rosemary.
What a gorgeous day there in Windsor, not too shabby. I want to start maybe by just getting your response to the senator saying that part of the reason she came to Canada was to get a sense of where things were with the Gordie Howe Bridge and put some pressure on her side. What can you tell us from your perspective about when that bridge might open?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. So you can see the bridge behind me. It's ready to go. It's been built. It's just waiting to have the seal of approval and open. And so we've watched this process unfold here in the city of Windsor for the better part of 25 years. We've watched the pillars come up out of the ground. We've watched the two halves meet in the middle. There's been lots of celebration about all of that. And now we're just waiting for the bridge to open and commercial traffic to start.
And what is the holdup from your side? Is it the U.S. federal government? Is it locals? What is it that you understand?
Yeah, I'm quite confident to say that it's President Trump and President Trump's policy decision to sort of apply a little more pressure to Canada, try and leverage this position with the Gordie Howe Bridge to get something else that he wants in the context of trade or something else. And he's doing what he can to frustrate the situation and not see this bridge open. But I have to think that the lawyers involved before they built a $6 or $7 billion bridge connecting two countries and getting a presidential permit, that there wouldn't be a simple operating clause in an agreement that requires both sides to open and operate the bridge, given 30 or 60 days notice of completion. And so I'm sure the last thing we want to do as a country is take the United States government to court to open the bridge. I'm sure there are pathways to negotiate through this, but until that happens, you see the bridge as it is, not open, but ready to go.
Okay, well, let me get your perspective on where you think things are in a broader sense on the lack of formal negotiations of CUSMA, because you guys are feeling things in a much more direct, impactful way, I would argue, in your city. How concerned are you that doesn't seem to be tracking right now?
Well, listen, I think there's a strategy likely involved, probably on both sides. But certainly on the Canadian side, I was pleasantly surprised to hear the Prime Minister reinforce just the other day the idea of an AMCAN fortress and sort of more deeper integration with the United States and Mexico. I think there's a lot of sense in that. And I think we'll get there. I mean, at the end of the day, we know the U.S. midterms are coming up. We know the president is sort of, his mind is occupied with the war in Iran and issues happening there. And frankly, Rosemary, the longer this takes, I mean, it's frustrating for us here in a border town. We want this resolved. It's applying pain and uncertainty to people who live here. But the longer this takes, I think, the United States folks, the people who live in the United States are going to feel the pressure. They're already feeling the pressure of tariffs on Canada in terms of being a tax to them. And just wait until this summer. It's starting to get nice out here. Wait till they go to the supermarket to buy a hamburger and they realize how much it costs to make 4 hamburgers for the family. That's thanks to Donald Trump and their president. And so we're hopeful that things will get resolved sooner rather than later. But I think there's a strategic method here that, will probably work out better for us in the long run.
Mayor, I'll end on this. We did see the big automakers in the U.S. at the end of the week there send a letter to the trade representative, Jamieson Greer, calling for an extension of CUSMA. I wonder whether you think their voices at the table could make a difference in terms of making sure that things remain in place.
Oh, absolutely. You think of the number of jobs just on the Canadian side, Rosemary, about 500,000 jobs direct in automotive manufacturing, but all of the parts sector, the tool, die, and mold sector are reliant on smooth and efficient trade with the United States. 90% of what we make here goes to the U.S. And so think of that from the other perspective, where U.S. folks are looking to export their products as well. We've got a deep integration with the supply chains on all sides of the border, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. with respect to automotive. And I would imagine they are applying, the OEMs are applying as much pressure as possible to work this out, because they're seeing the price of vehicles climb up past $50,000 now. And that is unaffordable for a lot of folks. And so something has to be done. Smart minds have to prevail here. And at some point, President Trump will realize that the policies he's put in place are having a very deep and negative impact to his own citizens.
Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkens, thank you for setting up that beautiful shot with the bridge behind you this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Okay, have a good rest of your Sunday. As the U.S. war against Iran continues to shock global markets, the International Energy Agency is calling on Canada to develop its energy resources further. I'll speak to the head of that agency on why he believes now is the right time and why Canada is in the right place for increased energy exports. You're watching RBL. Officials from the International Energy Agency and Canada's federal government met this past week to talk about how Canada can respond as the globe grapples with a growing energy crisis because of the war in Iran.
We need a willingness, this can be sometimes hard to accept, we need a willingness to use all sources of energy, including some gas, and all technologies beyond conventional renewables, certainly to nuclear, hydro, small modular reactors, carbon capture, and geothermal.
The talks highlighted the consequences, certainly, of the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the potential that Canada has to become an even bigger global energy exporter. Fatih Birol is the executive director of the International Energy Agency, and I spoke to him earlier this week about his meeting with the Prime Minister and the role that he thinks Canada can play amid the growing energy crisis. Fatih Birol, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
You have said that the war in Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz has created the largest energy crisis in history. Certainly people are feeling that, the oil and gas prices, the rise of those prices. What are the implications of this? What is your biggest concern right now?
My biggest concern is economy. Global economy will be affected, negatively affected. In many countries, we are going to see the inflation numbers going up, and the economic growth will be much weaker. And it is especially in the emerging and developing countries in Asia, but also slowly but surely it will come to Africa and Latin America, but other parts of the world, such as Europe or Japan or Korea, are not immune to that. In fact, no country is immune to the effects of this crisis. And it is not only oil and gas, because the Strait of Hormuz was a route for fertilizers, for petrochemicals, for sulfur and others. We will discover more and more through the supply chains, how they are disturbed by the Strait of Hormuz being closed, especially starting with the agricultural sector.
You have talked about this being the beginning of a reset of energy markets, and of course you met with the Prime Minister of Canada. I assume that came up, and what role do you see Canada playing in that reset?
So in the past, when we had major energy crisis like the oil crisis in 1970s, or the 4 years ago after the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the natural gas crisis in Europe, there were major policy responses. It will be the same this time. Countries in the next few years will review their energy strategies, which fuels, which technologies, and which energy partners. And this time, when the countries choose their energy partners, the most important criteria will be the trust. And today, Canada is one of those countries that enjoys trust across the world, and this will be your maybe most important commodity to sell.
You have also, though, suggested on that issue of trust and reliability that it could cause governments and countries to move away from fossil fuels and towards renewables. So I wonder, is there a case then for Canada, for instance, to build a new pipeline, if that is also a possibility?
Now, the countries will definitely continue to use oil or natural gas. For example, Canada's LNG will be very important for many Asian countries or for Europe, where I live. But also nuclear power. Canada is one of the leaders in the world, both in the large scale but also small modular reactors. Critical minerals. Canada had a lot of cards to play, in my view.
Understood. So as I'm sure you know, that Ottawa and Alberta have signed this MOU to potentially build a new pipeline from Alberta to the west coast of Canada. Do you think that makes sense, given what you're seeing for the future of fossil fuels?
I think when we look around the world, there will be still a need for fossil fuels, at least for some time. And today, there is a lot of need for Canadian energy in all of forms. So therefore, countries would prefer to get oil and gas from the countries that they trust, rather than there are major uncertainties and political questions. And in that respect, Canada has to make very good calculation whether or not this gas, this LNG terminal or whatever, the other pipelines are going to meet the growing demand in other countries or not.
What else do you think the government should be doing then to get people to buy into the idea the Prime Minister has that this country is an energy superpower and should be used that way?
I think the most important issue here is that we have 3-4 years that the governments around the world will make huge decisions in terms of the energy trade, new partners, new technologies. And Canada is very well positioned to answer those demands from the countries around the world. It can be Asia, it can be Europe, it can be elsewhere. But here, the speed is very important. And Canada has a multi-level governance system. And at the same time, Canadian government wants to hear all the voices, which is very good, and I respect it very much. I admire it. But this shouldn't be a reason to be slow, because there are only 3-4 years that the countries will make major decisions, and this will be the only challenge. And I was reassured by Prime Minister, with Energy Minister, and also the Finance Minister, that they are aware of the urgency of Canada stepping up. And I tell everybody, when I look at around the world, when I talk with the countries in Asia, with Africa, Europe, and elsewhere, I wish there were not one, but a few Canadas that could help to bring stability to the energy markets and further push the sustainability button.
I'll end on this because it's of concern to so many people, and that's around the shortage of jet fuel, certainly being felt in Europe, but there's at least one airline in Canada canceling some routes. There are concerns, obviously, in the U.S. What is the impact of this? And I wonder if you've had any conversations with the Trump administration about it.
Now, I talked with all the governments, with the Americans, but also Nigerians. They are important jet fuel exporters, Europeans, and everywhere. I said only a few weeks ago that Europe, especially Europe, has about 8 weeks of jet fuel left, because Europe was importing 75% of its jet fuel from Middle East. It is cut completely. And the bad news is, while the jet fuel imports are drying up, the demand for jet fuel, since we are coming to traveling season, increased by about 40%. So it is a rather serious issue, and we have seen several companies in Europe, Lufthansa, KLM, Scandinavian Airlines, Ryanair, they are reducing their flights substantially. I really hope that the Strait of Hormuz is open as soon as possible, and we get Europe gets the jet fuel from that region quickly.
Even if the Strait of Hormuz is opened up quickly, and we don't know where this is at as we're speaking, there will be a time lag, though, right, between the Strait opening and all of these issues being dealt with.
And definitely, it will not be the next day everything gets back to normal. It will be a gradual comeback, and in some cases it may take months, but in some cases it may take years, to be honest with you. Saudi Arabia and Iraq, they are not in the same basket. Iraq will take much longer, and oil and gas different. Oil may be a bit quicker, but natural gas, Qatar, a major gas exporter, very badly damaged Qatar terminal. So the name of the game will be volatility in the oil and gas markets in the next months, maybe years to come.
Fatih Birol, thank you so much for making time for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This past week, Canada's federal government announced some new financial support for aluminum, steel, and copper businesses that have been hammered by President Trump's tariffs after he expanded those sectoral levies just last month. I'll speak with the former U.S. trade representative about Canada's relationship with the U.S. as that July 1st CUSMA review deadline looms. You're watching RBL. A major Mexican trade mission to Canada launched this past week included high-level talks on the state of CUSMA, where Canadian officials reiterated their desire for their American counterparts to come to the table.
The Americans know very well that we're ready. We've done the work. We continue to do the work to sit down with them to discuss the bilateral issues that they have raised with us. And to proceed.
The Mexico-Canada talks come as those formal CUSMA negotiations we've been talking about between Canada and the U.S. have yet to resume. Last week, Canada also announced some additional financial support for businesses that have been struggling with the expansion of sectoral tariffs. Catherine Tai is a former U.S. trade representative as well as the executive director of the Coalition for New Trade. And I spoke to her earlier about the Canada-U.S. relationship and what it could mean for CUSMA. Ambassador Catherine Tai, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm delighted to be here with you.
I want to start with asking you whether you are surprised that we are closing into this July 1st CUSMA review deadline and there are no formal talks happening between Canada and the U.S.
I will say that I'm surprised. I heard from your program last week when you had an advisor from Prime Minister Carney's committee advising him on the review of what we call the USMCA and what you call the CUSMA, that the official talks hadn't really started. And I think that we're staring down maybe 50 days to July 1st. So that did surprise me very much.
And what does that mean? Like, if we blow past that deadline, as is sort of what we're being indicated by the government, is the reality, does that mean anything?
This is a great question, because I think that most people, when they hear that there's a July 1 deadline for this review of the entire agreement, the assumption might be that if you miss the deadline, if you don't have an agreement by July 1, that there's a cliff and the agreement disappears. The actual review mechanism is a little bit complicated in terms of the rules. But just to review, the USMCA and the CUSMA was implemented as a limited time agreement, just as a 16-year agreement. What's supposed to happen by July 1 of 2026 is an opportunity for all three countries to come together to agree or not agree to extend the agreement by another 16 years starting on July 1, 2026. Right. If the three parties cannot come to an agreement on July 1, then what happens? And this is really important to know. The agreement doesn't disappear. What happens is the agreement continues on its 16-year course. There's another 10 years left under this current authorization, if you will. And if there's no agreement by July 1 of 2026, these reviews are going to continue on an annual basis until we hit year 16.
Okay, interesting. That is good to know, and I think probably a little less worrying than if we blow past that deadline for people. What do you think right now is Canada's best leverage point? Because we are, as you know, dealing still with those really punishing sectoral tariffs. What should Canada be putting on the table to try and get this review started?
I think that a real question for all three governments is going to be what each one wants to accomplish in this review process, because it is an opportunity to amend, to reform, to update, and to fix the agreement. Recall that this agreement was concluded in 2019. It was entered into force. It came into life on July 1 of 2020. When this agreement was negotiated, it was pre-COVID, so it was pre the big supply shocks that we experienced as a result of the pandemic. It was also, importantly, before the advent of ChatGPT into the public consciousness. So that's just two examples of reasons why all three governments should be coming together around this review, whether it concludes this year or it's ongoing for another year or more, to really think deeply about what North America means to each of them and to them as a collective. So your question about Canada, I think there have been a lot of trade fireworks that have gone on between the US and Canada, the US and Mexico, a lot of it has been around goods trade. So trade of physical things that go across borders, right? Steel and aluminum, retaliation now on US alcohol coming into Canada. But what I want for all of the negotiators and frankly, all of the constituencies in North America to understand is that trade today and this agreement, CUSMA, USMCA, what the Mexicans call TMEC, is about so much more than just goods trade. So understanding your leverage around steel, aluminum, energy is important, but it is also really important not to lose sight of the larger intangible trade issues that are baked into this agreement. And I think among those, the one I really want to highlight is the rules that apply to the digital and technology companies. And so my long answer for you in terms of what Canada should keep an eye on is all of the elements that are in the conversation right now, but also what is going on when it comes to the intersection of technology, the technology companies, and the U.S. administration in this review process.
Let me, I don't have much time left, but let me ask you about some of the comments from Jamieson Greer and Howard Lutnick in recent weeks. Pretty disparaging remarks about, you talked about that U.S. booze ban, that seems to have become a real irritant. I wonder, as someone that's been in this position, how that kind of rhetoric impacts talks. Does it have a real impact on the ability to get to a place where you're negotiating?
I think certainly that kind of rhetoric and public performance has an impact, mostly on each government's politics and each administration's politics, right? There's a performative element of that. When you walk inside the room, there should be a different kind of rhetoric, a different kind of personality. And I know Jamieson Greer. I know he is the type of person who can roll up his sleeves, get into the weeds, and work on real trade issues that are important to North America. So I think in terms of assessing the productivity, the constructiveness of these talks when they actually happen, it will be about that inside the room dynamic.
Let me end just on the sectoral tariffs. There has been sort of some talk from the Canadian government that they may be here to stay, that the best that they can hope for is to lower them to a more reasonable rate. Do you think that is likely, that they are going to stick around for as long as Donald Trump is president?
I've heard Ambassador Greer talk about this when he visited Mexico recently, where it was reported that he made comments to Mexican stakeholders in industry not to expect these extra USMCA tariffs that are in place now to disappear as a result of the review. I think that's something that both the Canadians and the Mexicans need to take very carefully into consideration, but to also put it into the context that it is more likely than not that this review process will not conclude on July 1, but more or less begins on July 1 and will last potentially for another several years. And it's in that context that I think it's important for constituencies, that's workers, that's businesses, that's ordinary people, and the government in all three countries to keep in mind as they navigate this very, very important foundational agreement that ties together the three countries of North America.
Ambassador Catherine Tai, nice to see you again. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Ottawa is proposing some big changes to streamline the process for getting federal approvals. The changes are aimed at expediting reviews for big projects, including pipelines, mines, infrastructure projects. How does it shape Ottawa's approach moving forward? What are some of the criticisms we're hearing already? Our Sunday Scrum is standing by. You're watching Rosemary Barton live.
This is one of the big reasons why we have to do permitting reform, regulatory reform in Canada. It is an essential reason, apart from fundamental reasons of justice, why we need new partnerships with Indigenous peoples. And we need a willingness, this can be sometimes hard to accept, we need a willingness to use all sources of energy.
What is being proposed now is too much, too fast, too strong, and I think there's going to be a huge pushback.
Ottawa is planning new measures to speed up approvals for big projects, including a proposal to complete those reviews within 1 year. The government says the current process creates delays and uncertainty for investors. So what's motivating Ottawa to make this move? What could the changes mean for future projects? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Catherine Levesque, an Ottawa parliamentary reporter for the National Post, Robert Benzie, the Queen's Park bureau chief for the Toronto Star, and Jason Markusoff, producer, writer for CBC News in Calgary. Good to see you all again. Kathleen, I'll start with you this time. This is a discussion paper, an engagement period the government is putting forward to get some views on what they put forward. I did not expect it to be quite as huge as it is. Some really big changes. What stood out to you in what they're putting on the table here?
Yeah, I was not expecting so many vast changes either, if I'm being honest. Yeah. And my first reaction when I saw this was like, I wonder what Stephen Guilbeault's next op-ed in the Toronto Star will be. I guess instead he's been openly, criticizing this off the bat. So that really tells you, where his head is at. Look, I think, frankly, it's really undoing everything that happened under the Trudeau government, right? The Impact Assessment Act was brought forward because no projects were advancing because they were caught up in the courts. Now, in the last 10 years, less projects have advanced, or, if they have advanced, it was because it was paid with taxpayer money in the case of Trans Mountain. But I'm wondering if we're coming back to that. And, there are some proposals that I think might not bode very well. Either whether it's with Indigenous groups or whether it's with provinces or environmental groups, in particular those economic zones. Doug Ford tried it. I'm sure Rob has lots of thoughts. This is, Bill 5 is in front of the courts, and, the economic, he had special economic zones. This is basically the same principle. There's also a lot of concerns about, endangered species. Mm-hmm. And what this proposal paper is proposing to do is basically to start construction while we're awaiting permits, basically. So there's certainly a lot of questions for endangered species. I can think of the copper red horse, this special fish that we can find near the port of Contrecoeur. So there are just so many questions, and frankly, I wonder what will happen within the Liberal caucus. I think this discussion paper really has the potential to cause a rift among progressives.
Yeah, and I will point out, because I should, that the government did not put anybody up to talk about this on this program, on Power and Politics, nowhere. Which, if you're going to put something out, that's fine, but you are also responsible for explaining it to Canadians, and so far that hasn't happened. So I don't know if that's because they see already, Rob, the tough questions that have to be asked, if they're going to have a hard time defending the speed at which this has to happen. I don't know.
Rosie, Katrina is exactly right. This is the strongest opposition to this could come from within the Liberal caucus. Stephen Guilbeault, until 5 months and 2 weeks ago, I counted, was Mark Carney's Quebec lieutenant. So this is not some career maverick who's always been squawking from the sidelines. He was at the table literally until he quit cabinet last November. And I think this is a problem. He said that this is, quote unquote, worse than what Harper did when the Conservatives were in power under Prime Minister Stephen Harper. So let's say there are a dozen Liberal MPs who share Mr. Guilbeault's view, and I bet you there are, and it might even be more. Are they willing to stand up to their government, which has a very shaky majority, and say, look, this is not on? Now, Katrine mentioned Bill 5 here in Ontario, not to be confused with Bill C5 federally, and it has been contentious. But Premier Doug Ford has a majority in the legislature, and there's no one in his caucus out to get him on this thing. So it's contentious here, but it's not as contentious politically for Mr. Ford within his own caucus. I think Mr. Carney really has a lot of caucus management issues ahead of him. He may be right that we can't wait 15 years to approve a mine, as is currently the case here in Ontario. But if you do, as Mr. Guilbeault said, go too quickly, you could cause yourself damage politically and environmental damage in the long run.
Yeah, I wonder, Jason, if this will go ahead pretty easily because of the moment we're in, and because of the criticism that these projects take too long. That is true, and there are some ideas in these discussion papers that frankly probably do make sense. So I wonder, how does that play out when you have progressives or people who are more environmentally concerned, perhaps, who are speaking out, but you also have industry who are frankly fed up with waiting for things to happen.
Industry, investors, Canada's international reputation has become a place where it's difficult to get built. There are regulations over excessive steps. Certainly that's built in the last West. The West, you have places like the Calgary Chamber of Commerce, pipeline companies, other industries are very excited by this, almost to the inverse degree to which environmentalists and individuals like Stephen Guilbeault are alarmed by that. So that tension is going to be that push-pull factor. Mark Carney is somebody who's wanted to get things done. It's striking that in that meeting he had with Premier Danielle Smith of Alberta last week, one of the people sitting right next to him was Michael Sabia, the clerk of the Privy Council. He is somebody who was brought in as somebody who was known to try to execute. But I will note that this is one of the most fascinating things about this, and this is something we haven't seen Carney doing a whole lot of, I'm not mistaken, is making these discussion papers. That is like this big buffet of everything from, allowing certain projects to be exempted from the Species of Risk Act, to sidelining the impact agency entirely, from pipelines to making cabinet make a decision on the public interest first. There are so many things in this discussion paper. In the past, we've seen Carney bring forward just legislation, this is what we're doing, major project office, boom, let's vote on it, done. That this is a discussion paper makes me wonder if he's willing to part ways with quite a few of these proposals in favor of people saying, oh, this isn't so bad after all, not as bad as we initially found it, to soften some of that opposition within Liberal ranks.
Yeah, maybe that's possible, I suppose, Catherine. And then meanwhile, you have the Conservative, Shannon Stubbs, who I had on earlier in the show, say, okay, well, A, it doesn't even go far enough, and B, you haven't done anything yet anyway. So when are you actually going to get the projects going?
Yeah, I take her point that, I was kind of reading this discussion paper and I said, oh, I thought those are things that were supposed to happen anyways with the Major Projects Office, right? Why are we redoing this work? But look, I think at the end of the day, the Conservatives will support these measures. I think those are measures that they will like. I was talking about economic zones just a minute ago, and Pierre Poilievre, that's actually something that he was proposing in the last election. He was talking about shovel-ready zones. So it's essentially the same concept. And look, I think Conservatives want projects to move faster. I think they want less red tape. So certainly, look, even if all the Liberals don't necessarily vote for this legislation, I think Mark Carney might count on the support of the Conservatives. But again, we'll see, right? 30 days for the consultation. I'm told the bill will come forward before the end of the session. What I don't know is whether they're going to be passing it very quickly before the session rises for the summer, or whether they're going to be waiting until the fall, and what are these modifications going to look like in the actual bill.
Yeah, and they have C5 if they don't want to move it quickly. They have that as a backup. Last 30 seconds to you, Rob.
Yeah, exactly, Rosie. Although this does, as Katrine mentioned, when this was CBC first broke this last week, I remember thinking, well, why is this even necessary? I thought C5 was the be-all, end-all, which was passed, by the way, when Carney had a minority in the Commons, and the Tories supported him. So it shows that maybe C5 wasn't all that it was supposed to be, or all that it was cracked up to be.
Yeah, and it has a sunset clause of 4 years, too, so I guess that is another factor. Okay, listen, guys, thank you for being here. Kathleen Novak, Rob Benzie, Jason Markusoff. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We'll have lots more coverage, of course, of what's unfolding on that ship on the coast of Spain. 4 Canadians that were on the ship where hantavirus broke out are now on their way back to Canada and will, of course, be quarantined. But you can see more on our live page there and much more on CBC News Network through the day if you're following that story. Meanwhile, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, and in particular, of course, my mom. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.